Today on the Big 3 in 30, the Clippers could trade James Harden.
So why in the world would James Harden be asking out?
The Grizzlies snap their losing streak against the Timberwolves.
The Grizzlies were aggressive getting to the charity stripe, and Cedric Howard was a good example of that.
And the Rockets hold off the Pacers for a win.
Alfred Sengun's absolutely monster 39.16 rebound performance.
This is the Big 3 in 30 NBA. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 in 30 NBA starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 in 30 your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. As Thursday's trade deadline approaches, the Clippers could move on from star guard James Harden. Locked On Clippers host Darian Vaziri goes over the price tag on Harden and which teams could go after him.
James Harden has said multiple times he wants to retire a Clipper. So why in the world would James Harden be asking out? And this broke at exactly 8:26 p.m. The Los Angeles Clippers and 11-time All-Star James Harden are working through whether the sides can find a deal by Thursday's NBA trade deadline, sources tell ESPN. Both sides are aligned in conversations together and with interested teams. So my first thought was it has to be something contract related. And this is James Harden's contract situation right now. James Harden is getting paid $39 million this year, but I guess the amount's not fully guaranteed. And then he has a player option for next year that he can opt in and get paid $42,317,307. He wants, usually players are re-upping before the last year of their player option. When they're a star of that caliber, they want to get a new contract. They want to get some more guaranteed money. The Clippers want all the big-time contracts like Kawhi and James off the books in 2027 to go a different direction. That's been pretty public information. James Harden is obviously not going to retire next year. He's too good still. So he probably wants a verbal guarantee because he's technically not extension eligible yet. But he probably wants a verbal guarantee similar to how the Philadelphia 76ers situation went, where he feels, okay, you guys are going to extend me. You're going to give me that faith. Because if you're James Harden, you are 36 years old. You never know when an injury can happen. So that's my biggest thought, is that this is happening because of contract reasons. James Harden wants to re-up. He wants to get probably some kind of verbal confirmation that we're going to extend him. And the Clippers are not about that. Apparently, they've been discussing, according to Brett Siegel, James Harden and the Clippers have been discussing a potential split for weeks, sources told Clutch Points and Tomer Azarly. So, and more information. League sources told Clutch Points that tonight's news was brought forth by James Harden and his camp, as the Clippers were stunned to find out about him wanting out. There's more to that tweet, but I'll talk about that later. Although the team that they're saying is the Cavaliers. I'll talk about their angle, but that's the team that's been named in these rumors. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the team that the Clippers have had talks with, but I'm just so in shock. And for those that are wondering, what are we going to do? Obviously, that depends on the return, but my initial thought was, wow, you knew that this was going to happen eventually, right? You knew that there was going to be a point where James Harden, he wants to retire a Clipper. He was going to want to stay here past 2027, and the Clippers, because I've always wondered that. I was like, James is going to want to stay past 2027. Do they know that? What's going to happen when those conversations come about? And are they going to give in and have James Harden stay, even though they want to go a different direction, allegedly, in 2027? And it seems like they're standing their ground on that. And I think they're absolutely in the right. So it sounds like another Paul George type of situation. And there might be a lot of fans that are saying it's a bummer because, James is still so good and he's having in terms of scoring, he hasn't averaged this many points since 2019-20. I mean, he got snubbed completely from the All-Star game, but you figured we weren't going to have two All-Stars when we're 23 and 26 or 23 and 25 when they were announced. But not having one is insane. Besides the point, James Harden averaging 25, 5, and 8 this year at age 36, and he started 44 games. He's only missed 4 games this whole season. Come on now. Actually, 5 games this whole season. But he's playing really good basketball at the end of the day. He's playing really good basketball. So it's just kind of not a great thing for the team. The guy that's being mentioned is Darius Garland. Darius Garland, I think he's a very good player. He has availability issues, though, compared to Harden, and he's just not as good as even this version of Harden, in my opinion. I think the only year that it was you can make a comparison was last year, but I still think Harden was, the weight that he had to carry was so much greater than Darius Garland, and James Harden also has that playoff experience that Darius Garland just doesn't have. So in the short term, I don't think that this is going to help the Clippers for James Harden to get traded. Now, the question is it actually going to happen? There's rumors that the Cavs want a pick as well. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, why would we do that? We don't. If they want to pick, I'm hanging up the phone. The question is James Harden going to sit out now? Is he going to pull the fat suit stuff where he plays and he's like quitting? Like, I feel like he wouldn't do that to this team. I feel like the Clippers have been good to him. We've been seemingly in lockstep the whole way through, and James has said good things about the organization, and the organization has done the same with James. James's tenure with the Clippers has been overwhelmingly positive, despite, you can say, the lack of playoff success. But James Harden's been the constant that's been available, and that's been that rock for the Clippers. You know what I'm saying? These last 2.5 years since he's been on the team. So, it makes sense that he feels like he deserves something. And it makes sense that the Clippers are standing their ground. The question is like, what's the relationship right now between James Harden and the front office and Lawrence Frank and Trent Redden? What's the relationship? Because if he's like pissed off James Harden, then we're not going to get a great James Harden anymore. I mean, now we know why he's missed games. So is he sitting out? Because he didn't play against Phoenix. He didn't play against Philly. And it's in personal reasons. That was the reason. He wants out. Something has gone on in the background with probably contract negotiations. So we're going to probably get more information in the coming days. But it's just one of the biggest shocks of my time as a Clipper fan to hear this news on Monday night. Absolutely crazy. But yeah, there hasn't been a specific big article that has talked about the main reason why, but everybody seems to suspect it's contract related.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NBA. The Grizzlies had lost 6 straight games before beating the Timberwolves last night, behind 30 from Jaren Jackson Jr. Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies recaps the win.
I want to lead off with Cedric Howard. And I think it's important to lead off with Cedric Howard on this episode because he looked emphatically aggressive in this game. And I think that the reason I want to lead off with Ced is he was indicative of the Grizzlies as a whole. 35 free throws, partially because these officials were not the best. They called a lot of fouls, 66 total free throws between the two teams, multiple technical fouls. They got in trouble, almost losing control of the contest a couple of times. But the Grizzlies were aggressive getting to the charity stripe, and Cedric Howard was a good example of that. Cedric Howard had a dominant throwdown dunk late in the contest. It was kind of the cherry on top of the Sunday of snapping the 6-game losing streak, the exclamation mark in one of the best all-around team performances that the Memphis Grizzlies have had in some time. 7 Memphis Grizzlies players scored at least 13 points. Gigi had 13. Vince Williams Jr. and Cam Spencer both had 16. Cedric Howard, previously mentioned, had 14. 18 for Jalen Wells, 19 in 20 minutes for Ty Jerome. Another really impressive performance for him, especially offensively. 8 assists, 6 rebounds. And again, Jaren Jackson Jr. had a 30-piece. We'll talk more about Triple J later on in the show. But I want to lead off with said because as this season progresses, if what we think is going to happen happens, and it's possible it doesn't, with Ja Morant being traded, DeMichael's talked a lot about that. I've talked a lot about that. There's a world where 72 hours or so from now, I guess, 48 hours, depending on when you're checking out this episode of the show, Thursday, when the trade deadline concludes, there's a chance Ja Morant is still a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. That's not what the Grizzlies organization wants. It might be what Ja wants, but as we've discussed, Ja kind of wants it on his terms, right? And we'll talk more about that later on in the program. But there's a chance Ja Morant is still a member of this franchise. And if that's the case, and he plays coming out of the trade deadline, once he's healthy, I should specify that he's currently on the injury report, out with that elbow injury. Once he's cleared to return to play, the way that the Grizzlies played against the Timberwolves, the way that the Grizzlies played in London against the Magic, that is a fun basketball team to watch. Quick side note, maybe the Grizzlies should just play each team in the NBA back-to-back games, right? Because the Magic game stands out in my mind's eye as the last time they looked this good, and that was the second game against the same team. Same thing here, right? The Grizzlies lose a tough one on Saturday night against the Timberwolves in FedEx Forum, and then a couple nights later, they get a chance to play the Minnesota Timberwolves again, and it looks like a different team. Jaren Jackson Jr. played in this game and not in the previous one, and that made a major difference. Again, we'll talk about Triple J here momentarily. But I come back to Cedric Howard because he checks 2 boxes for me. One, the aggression that I was talking about earlier, the physicality, the intensity. That needs to be prevalent every game possible moving forward the remaining of the season, regardless of what happens at the trade deadline. Because that is what's going to make this team watchable. The winning and the losing no longer matters. It doesn't apply. At least not for me. Maybe you still care. Maybe you're hoping they make a play-in push. And if they win some games and they get to the play-in conversation, I'm never going to belabor a team for actively competing. That's not the job of the players and the coaches to throw games. If the front office wants to tank, that's a front office decision. And if this Grizzlies team is going to truly tank, I think we saw exactly what is going to have to happen. And we'll talk more about that here in a bit. The Grizzlies that were on the court against the Timberwolves, the Minnesota Timberwolves who have made the Western Conference Finals the last couple of years, that Grizzlies team, I'm not saying they make the Western Conference Finals, but they're too good to tank. And that's assuming Zach Edey potentially returns to the lineup in the next month or so. Probably not. I'm speaking for myself, not to Michael. No inside source on this information. If Zach Edey doesn't play again this season, I wouldn't be surprised. But Ja Morant should return. Brandon Clark eventually will be out there. Scottie Pippen Jr. The team's good, too good to tank. They're too good to be bad. So if you prioritize trying to get in the best position possible in a loaded top end of the NBA lottery this coming draft class, you're going to have to make some pretty seismic moves because that team that I saw, that you probably saw, and if you missed the game, at least find the highlights. That was the Tuomas Isalo offensive system. And I know I've been hard on Isalo throughout the season. Ty Jerome makes it work. Ty Jerome makes it click. Ty Jerome gets it. And I'm sure that's part of the reason why he chose the Grizzlies organization. That was part of reports when free agency hit. I think it was Chris Harrington of the Daily Memphian. I know DeMichael has talked about it as well. He saw what the vision was. And he felt that it would fit his skill set. And hot dang. Through 2 games and 40 minutes of basketball, 20 minutes per game. Ty Jerome looks like the real deal. He's aggressive. he gets to the rim, just like Cedric Coward did on that emphatic dunk to close out the contest. So that aggression, that competitiveness, win or lose, no matter what happens over the next couple of days, that mentality needs to stick. And there also needs to be a continued investment in these young players. And we'll talk more about that later on in the show too. It can't just be Cedric Coward that I'm talking about on a night in, night out basis, or that DeMichael is talking about on a night in, night out basis. We need to continue to see investment in Gigi Jackson. We need to continue to see investment in Cam Spencer, even with Ty Jerome back. Because you could argue Ty Jerome and Vince Williams Jr. are the most direct negatives to Ty Jerome being reinserted into this rotation. And I want to stress, not complaining about Ty Jerome being on the court, but there's not enough minutes for all these guys if and when they all get off the injury report. So who sits? It can't be Cam Spencer. I don't want it to be Vince Williams Jr., but I know it can't be Cam Spencer because of what he brings to the table offensively, especially as a three-point shooter. We need to keep talking about him. We need to keep talking about Gigi Jackson. We need to keep talking about Jalen Wells, who had another really strong shooting performance, looking more comfortable, looking more in rhythm, not forcing things, being in a position to take advantage of looks, thanks to Ty Jerome and others, and maximizing those reps, maximizing those minutes. That needs to be a focus. Because regardless of whether Ja Morant is here or not, Jaren Jackson Jr., who we're about to talk about, whether he's here or not, whatever the direction is that the front office chooses, the coaching staff and the players are going to continue to compete. That level of execution, that level of energy, it's not always going to be perfect. The turnovers reared their ugly head in the second half as the Timberwolves tried to make a run, but that level of effort, that's what needs to be seen. And that effort has been questioned, whether it was against Charlotte and other games recently during this 6-game losing streak. Where was that energy? It was there on Monday. And if the Grizzlies can maintain that, win or lose, they'll be a much more fun and productive team to watch play.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're back in the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NBA. The Rockets went into Indiana and held off the Pacers for a win last night, and Locked On Rockets host Jackson Gatlin has the recap.
The Rockets 118-114 win against the Indiana Pacers. Alperen Sengun's absolutely monster 39.16 rebound performance. Potentially a direct response to not being selected as an all-star reserve, playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, I imagine. We'll talk about the other key contributors in this game, the key turning point of this game near the top of the fourth quarter that I think helped seal this win for the Rockets. And then a little bit later on in the program, talk about a good old friend, the bearded one, James Harden, demanding a trade from the Clippers. Could a Rockets reunion potentially be in play at this NBA trade deadline? We'll wear some, we'll throw on some tinfoil hats and run a little wild later in the show. So stick around for that. And of course, want to thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Final score, 118-114. And I know on the surface, it's like, oh, well, the Rockets are just barely scraping by against the Mavs and now the Pacers. And yeah, it's kind of the reality of the situation when the floor just falls out from under you offensively. And frankly, this Pacers team is a lot better than their record would indicate, right? They were in the finals this past season. And, you know, I know they had a down year, but they had a ton of injuries to start the year. And this roster outside of Tyrese Halliburton and Obi Toppin is healthy now. You know, no Miles Turner anymore either. But there's still a ton of talent on this Pacers roster. No talent that can contain Alperen Şengün, though. Didn't matter who they tried to throw on Alperen Şengün, whether it was Jay Huff, whether it was Jarris Walker, whether it was Isaiah Jackson, whether it was Benedict Mathurin on a switch, Siaka, it didn't matter. If you were in a Pacers jersey and you tried to guard Alperen Şengün in this game, you were getting flat out cooked. 39 points on 13 of 25 shooting, matching his season high from opening night in the double overtime loss to the Thunder. 39 points, 13 of 25 shooting, missed both his threes, so 0 of 2 there, which also means he was 13 of 23 inside the arc, 13 of 18 at the free throw line for Alpi, 16 rebounds, 7 of them coming on the offensive glass, 5 dimes, 5 turnovers. Just an absolutely monster game in a game where the Rockets didn't have Kevin Durant. And you knew coming, if you're an everydayer and you listened to our Pacers preview for this game, Locked On Pacers host Tony East pointed out that Alperen Şengün was going to be a problem for this Pacers team, that they would have no answer for him on the interior. And that's exactly what it looked like. And the scouting report was clear as day. Rockets funneled so much of their offense into Alperen Şengün on the interior. He had 21 points at halftime, the most points he's ever scored in a half in his NBA career. Was just, play after play after play. They were pummeling the Pacers inside. And generally the Rockets had, for the first little bit of this game, for the first half of this game, Rockets' offensive approach was actually pretty decent. They lost the first quarter, but mainly just because the Pacers couldn't miss from three. And the Pacers actually wound up shooting 46% from downtown in this game. They hit 12 of 26 from long range. And there were points where it just kind of felt like the math advantage was in favor of the Pacers. But to see Alperen Şengün kind of respond, right, feeling probably a little slighted by not receiving the All-Star nod, coming out, playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, putting the team on his back, and putting up this kind of a performance without Kevin Durant in the lineup. There were question marks about, okay, where are the Rockets going to get their scoring from? They've been so incredibly KD dependent as of late. It's great to see Şengün step up and deliver this type of a game. And as nuts as this game was, Rockets at one point held a 12-point lead, and things kind of devolved at the end of this game to where Şengün had a chance to seal this thing on the free throw line. And I'll be completely honest, by the end of the game, Alpi looked absolutely gassed. Like, he only played 35 minutes, I think closer to 36 when you look at if you go find the seconds total. So we'll say 36 minutes. But just the toll that it takes to be physically banging that way all game long, and to play the style in which he does, right, to score on the interior, to be battling with guys constantly throughout the game. He was wiped out by the end of the game. I'm not making excuses for the missed free throws. He should have sank at least one of them, but the fact that Alpi went to the free throw line with the Rockets up 3, 117-114, and missed both free throws, but then the Rockets were able to get the offensive rebound. Shout out to Stay Ready crew captain Jayshawn Tate, who got in the mix, in the fray, and was able to help tip out the ball and basically forcing the issue on the offensive glass, and the Rockets able to recover the missed free throw, giving them another set of free throws to try and put the game away, with Amin Thompson being sent to the line. And then he misses the first one. It's like the Rockets were trying to give this game away to the Pacers at the end. You had the Reed Shepherd damn near turnover at the very end on the inbounds attempt. Like, this game was kind of a sloppy mess at the end, but an ugly win is still a win. And this Rockets team, despite almost being 2/3 of the way through this season, unfortunately, they're still figuring out and learning how to close out at the end of some of these games and how to be able to put teams away. And it wasn't pretty. And it would have been nicer if they could have just maintained that, that sizable lead, if they could have just kept a cozy little double-digit lead and kind of coasted to the finish line, similar to how they did earlier in the season when they were just straight up dominating teams. They haven't been able to do that in a little while. But a win is a win. They were able to put it away. Amin Thompson hit the second free throw, sealing the game at 118, 114. And look, I saw somebody reference this is like during the game. I forget who said it. Like the Rockets have the tendency to take their foot off the gas or something like that. I wouldn't even go so far as say they have a tendency to take the foot off the gas. I would go so far as say they have a tendency to take a gun and point it at the foot that is on the gas pedal and then empty the clip into said foot. Like that's what this team does. It's not like they just stop trying. It's not that they're not giving effort or anything. It's just they just fail to execute constantly, right? Like the turnovers come back to kill them, and then they give up transition opportunities. And then when the offense dries up and then they can't get stops on the other end, and you let a team back in. And the Pacers, despite their record, are still a team with very talented players, with an all-star in Pascal Siakam. I'm sure that was probably some extra motivation too on the other end of the aisle, seeing Pascal Siakam being selected for the all-star team and then not receiving the honor himself. So I'm sure Alpi felt some kind of way about that.
That's all for today's Big 3 in 30 NBA. If you follow football or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NFL and on campus going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NFL or the Big 3 in 30 college wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 in 30 NBA.